Thank you, everybody, for coming to the Aaron Torres Podcast YouTube page. If you could do me a quick favor, see that little subscribe button at the bottom of your screen? Go ahead, click that subscribe button. Really does help our channel grow, our audience grow, and I really do appreciate it more than you know. So click that subscribe button. Appreciate your support. Now, here's the video that you came here for. The one team that I do think is underrated in this preseason poll, and I know you all are going to make fun of me for saying this team because every year there are so many guys and girls in the media that overrate this team. I do think Texas A&M is underrated. I know what you're going to say, Torres, every single year. You media people, you overrate Texas A&M. To which I would say you're right. I can't argue it. I've been arguing that Texas A&M is due for years now. But at the same time, what stands out to me about Texas A&M is a few things. First off, as we enter this new world of the college football playoff expansion, but also conference expansion, I know I've said this in a lot of places. So if you've heard me say this, forgive me. But I kind of believe that we are entering a new world where schedules are more important now than they have ever been. It's almost like the NFL, right? Because you look at the NFL, and think about the NFL. Thing about the NFL is that if you think about the NFL, every year we have a team go from worst to first place, right? Every year there's a team that stunk the year before, goes to first place, wins their division, makes the playoffs. Last year it was the Houston Texans. Now, obviously, there are a number of factors that can go into that. Is it an injured player coming back? In the case of the Houston Texans, CJ Stroud is better than most people thought he was going to be. But you know what generally leads to teams being vastly improved in the NFL one year over the other? They're playing a last place schedule. So if you finished in last place, you're playing other last place teams. And if you get better and they don't, it's advantage you. And so in the NFL, schedule matters maybe more than anything. And I think in the SEC and the Big Ten, it's going to be that way going forward with these teams. And so you look at Texas A&M. Listen, Texas A&M, you could argue, got about as many breaks as you possibly could with the schedule. That's not even taking into their personnel, the coaching change, whatever. They got as many scheduling breaks as you possibly could. First off, they're one of only two teams in the SEC. Arkansas is the other, has neither Georgia nor Bama on the schedule. That's a pretty good start. Beyond that, no Georgia, no Bama. They also don't play Ole Miss, which was picked to finish number 4 in the preseason polls. That's interesting in its own right because they've struggled historically with Ole Miss. Lane Kiffin seems to have that program's number. And then, oh, by the way, on top of that, they also play of their toughest games, essentially all of them are at home. They play Notre Dame at home in the out-of-conference. That doesn't even matter for the preseason poll. But then you look at the conference home games. Their three toughest conference games are all at home. Missouri at home, Ole Miss at home, or not Ole Miss, excuse me. Missouri at home, LSU at home, and Texas at home. And so you look at that schedule. No Bama and Georgia. No Oklahoma. No Ole Miss. Plus, no Tennessee, by the way, which I think is an important one. Plus, you get Texas at home, you get Missouri at home, you get LSU at home. Also worth noting, of their road games, listen, there are no easy places to play in the SEC, except maybe Vanderbilt. But of their true road games, they play at Florida, at Mississippi State, and their final SEC road game is at Auburn, okay? None of those places are easy to play. But at the same time, Auburn was picked to finish 10th, Florida picked to finish 12th, and Mississippi State picked to finish 15th. So all three true road games, bottom half of the league. Your three toughest games are at home. Advantage Texas A&M. And then I think the other thing we have to remember with Texas A&M, they do have good players, right? Like part of the reason that everybody was mad with Jimbo Fisher, part of the reason why he got fired isn't just because of wins and losses. It's because of wins and losses with an insanely talented roster. And so you look at what Jimbo Fisher inherited, what he kept, what he developed, what he built. I mean, look, 2022 class, one of the greatest classes of all time. And so you look at what Mike Elko now inherits. Listen, it's not perfect. They lost a lot through the portal. But at the same time, Connor Wigman's back. And you could argue, outside of Carson Beck and obviously Quinn Ewers, who's now coming into the league, you could argue Connor Wigman's as accomplished as anybody. Now, I know Jalen Milroe won the SEC title last year at Alabama, but he didn't statistically do what Connor Wigman did in a short amount of time 2 years ago when he played as a true freshman. Was great, 7 touchdowns in like 3 games. He gets hurt early last year. Nobody knows what their season would have been. But you have Connor Wigman. You have, on top of that, 3 established running backs. You have 2 or 3 really good wide receivers, and that defense still has a lot of talent from a season ago. Top 20 defense a year ago, by the way. Shamar Turner's back. Shamar Stewart's back. Some of the defensive backs are back. By the way, you add one of the best transfers in the country, Nick Scourton from Purdue. So you look at A&M, the schedule's there, the talent's there. Let me say one other thing. Mike Elko, he ain't Jimbo Fisher, okay? And Mike Elko, if you know about him, if you don't know about him, remember, this is a guy that if you want to say it's A&M, they'll figure out a way to screw it up. Okay, I can't argue with you on that. But at the same time, remember, this guy went to Duke 2 years ago. Went to Duke 2 years ago. And won 9 games in his first year. And so everyone's going to sit there and say, oh, it's Texas A&M. It's overrated. Who is this guy? All I'm saying is he won 9 games in year 1 at Duke. I know the ACC ain't the SEC, but also the roster that he inherited at Duke certainly isn't what he's inheriting in A&M. Lastly, with Elko and with A&M, then we'll get to the last team. It is worth noting, for all the complaints about Jimbo Fisher, kind of interesting that A&M pretty much played its best football under Jimbo Fisher with Mike Elko as its defensive coordinator, and that there's a pretty direct parallel of Elko leaving and the program falling apart. Jimbo Fisher's first 4 years with Elko as his defensive coordinator, 9-4, 8-5, 9-1 in that COVID year, 8-4. Listen, not perfect. There's a reason they called him Texas 8-4, but it doesn't change the fact that they were respectable, if not great. First year without Elko, 5-7. Second year, 7-5. So you go 12-13 post Elko, and you were whatever, probably about 15 games above 500 before that. So I just sit there and say, like, Elko is that dude. By the way, he recruited a lot of those guys in the locker room. So it's not like all those guys have no idea who he is, no respect for him. No. They respect him. They stayed for him. I think Texas A&M, listen, I can't sit here and say they're a playoff team. There are still questions. I think they probably finish somewhere in that 5 to 6 range. I actually think it's conceivable they finish ahead of LSU, who we just talked about.